You're listening to your Healthy Radio Addiction, the Laura Ingraham Show. There is a Department of Homeland Security U.S. immigration exam that is administered to people who are becoming American citizens, and proudly so. They pledge allegiance to the flag, but they take a test. And in the test, there are various questions you're asked about our Constitution and our country and our belief system. And there's an interesting change underway, and when it comes to the First Amendment and our religious freedom. And there was one congressman who was just all over what might be happening at the hands of our left-wing DHS, and I'm delighted he's with us. And this is Senator James Lankford, Republican from the great state of Oklahoma, co-chairman of the Congressional Prayer Caucus, who's going to give us the latest of this this DHS move on this immigration exam, and Senator Lankford stopping by for a few moments. Senator, great to talk to you, my friend. How are you?
Great to be with you.
So where are we here? There's an exam a citizenship exam. Is this part of it, the new controversy that you've uncovered here?
It is. It's one of those many things that some folks would just look over the top of and say it's not really that big a deal, but it lists out on a multiple-choice question saying to these folks that are applying to become American citizens, they've gone through all this long process, they're in the final process of the test, and it asks them, what rights do American citizens have? Just check all these rights that we would have, and one of them lists the freedom of worship. And it may seem like just a small thing, but the United States, we don't have freedom of worship. That happens in some other closed countries. We have freedom for the free exercise of religion. The reason why that's so important is freedom of worship means if you go in that building and get with other people that think like you can do whatever you want. But when you leave the building, that's you don't have free worship anymore because you're outside the building. We have freedom of your free exercise of religion, meaning not only you can believe something, but you can even practice what you believe in your work, in your family, in your leisure, and, yes, even in your worship. So it's a very different standard. So I've actually confronted the Department of Homeland Security and Jay Johnson in a hearing. We've done follow-up with him. We're going to continue to work through this and get this corrected so that new citizens don't have a false belief of what we really have. It's not small. It's large, what we have.
So people have to understand that the left is moving on many different fronts against our free exercise, and we've seen this happening in cultural forums. We've seen it happening in our public schools. We've certainly seen it happening at the hands of judicial activists on our courts. But this is just a new twist on what we've been fighting for a long time, to minimize the freedom to exercise your religious beliefs. And that means publicly exercise your religious beliefs with public symbolism, with public expression of your faithful beliefs without retribution from the government. And we're seeing this bubble up right now, aren't we, Senator, when it comes to this issue of gay marriage? There are a lot of people out there who are concerned that their rightful and in their own mind, their belief that marriage is between a man and a woman will be seen as future hate speech. It will delegitimize tax-exempt status for organizations and might come into play in all sorts of ways, in a negative way toward the believers. And I think what you uncovered is part of this overall push to minimize the freedom of religion.
That is correct. And I'd say what is the dangerous thing now, we have, as a first freedom as a country, have this, that the government shall make no law prohibiting the freedom of religion, the free exercise of our religion. Now that has moved from just this common belief that everyone understands everyone has the right to believe and to practice their belief or to have no belief. This is America. You don't have to have any faith at all. So to be able to honor and represent that for anyone across the entire country, now it has moved to where if someone says you believe in the freedom of religion, their response is, oh, so you hate gays. Well, that's a pretty big shift that's happened. I will tell you, when I speak to college students, when I speak to folks in their 20s and early 30s, it comes up very commonly. What are we going to do in America with the issue of freedom of religion? So what do you mean, what are we going to do with it? We're going to continue to protect that. But it is this belief now that if you believe in the freedom of religion, you believe in the freedom of bigotry, or you believe in discrimination. And so the left has done a very good job defining this. We have not done a good job of being able to push back and trying to be clear in an issue. We believe all people should have freedom. We believe that all people should have the freedom of religion, and that you cannot take one group, any group, whoever it may be, and to be able to isolate them and say, you're not a real American, you're not us. And that is the shift that the left is taking on now.
Senator Lankford, what do you think about what happened with Governor Pence with that Religious Freedom Restoration Act that he was about to sign into law in Indiana? He got a huge blowback from corporate America that stepped in to say, you do this, and we're going to shut you down. Basically, we're going to pull out of your state. And Pence just turns around and just like wilts. He just wilted in the face of the pressure. And maybe people say, well, I don't doubt that he did, and most people would. But what's your sense on that?
No, it's remarkable just to be able to see the journey that this whole concept has gone on, and what Mike has gone through. And Mike has been a pretty strong voice for a long time for a lot of conservative issues. But the pressure is very intense on it. You can take that compared to what's happening, for instance, with Hobby Lobby and what they went through for several years, where they said just a basic thing with Obamacare, when they were going to require a private company to provide a drug that they believed provided abortions, and they were not going to do that because of their faith. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and at the end of the day, won it in the Supreme Court with this basic question: can a company, it's a privately owned company, can they live their faith, or is faith only isolated on weekends? The final decision in that case, in a 5-4 decision, which is amazing to me to think we have 4 Supreme Court justices that are struggling with the freedom of religion and the freedom to be able to live your faith in the workplace. But in a 5-4 decision to come back and say, yes, in America, you can still live your faith in the workplace. But it's a challenge that's happening. We need to be clear in the way that we articulate it. We need to continue to affirm this is any faith for any person, but we can't be afraid to be able to live our faith in the public square. This is the basics of who we are. If you go to in the United States Capitol, there's a painting in the rotunda of the United States Capitol called the Embarkation of the Pilgrims. It's to depict how America began. It's hung there in the Capitol since 1843, and it shows a group of individuals gathered on the deck of a ship around an open Bible praying, leaving out from Europe. And that's the painting that it depicts. Here's how America started, how far we have come, when there's this conversation to say, can we really talk about faith anymore, or is that just bigotry? It's not bigotry. It's the soul of who people are, and it's a basic freedom that we should honor.
This is our country. This is our country. And so many people, Senator, think we're losing our country. We're losing our borders. We're losing our separation of powers. Our constitutional underpinnings, congressional authority is being diluted. I believe it's being diluted in this trade negotiation. I believe it's been diluted in war powers. I believe it's been diluted in immigration because we haven't acted on that. And people are, there's a sense of, where's this all going to end? How is this going to end? If in fact we have a lot of Republicans who are so easily cowed by the cultural pressure, by the economic pressure, that what's best for America, or frankly what's even constitutional, goes into the back seat or is ignored. So where does this end?
It's the chipping away of our freedoms, really, and this goes deep in the weeds on some of these legal issues, but in the 1980s there was a court decision called the Chevron decision, which gave deference to agencies and basically said when on complicated matters, when the agency makes a decision, the court's going to defer to them and say, we're going to trust your judgment. This is a very complicated issue that you've worked all this out. That decision continues to roll out with consequences, and now the executive branch, we've seen how President Obama is just an expert at trying to find the gray area of the law and to try to write some regulation that had never been intended. And the courts are not stopping it, so this is something that the legislative branch has got to engage in, and quite frankly, our next president can't be just a Ronald Reagan president. We've got to have a George Washington president that's willing to be offered power and turn it down and to reset the executive branch. Because this is going to take a change in law to do it, and the president's going to have to step in and join us in it.
There are some who believe that social issues need to be left behind for a Republican to be relevant in 2016, a Republican presidential candidate. You've seen Jeb Bush yesterday back away from his earlier comments when he was a conservative as a governor and running for governor, thinking of running for governor back in 1995. He was planning his run for the governorship when he said, look, the issue of shame is now removed from being a single mother. And so we have more single moms, more people without, fathers and role models. And he felt the need to actually say he's evolved on that issue. What's your reaction to that evolution, Senator?
Yeah, well, I would have to tell you, I just firmly believe social issues are a part of who we are as Americans. And I'm shocked at the number of conservatives that would say that we need to get away from social issues, but it seems to be that social issues are the only thing that the left talks about. Well, we can also speak about these same things and to be able to talk about it in such a way that actually honors individuals. Like when you deal with abortion. Abortion is about a child. They want to make it all about the choices of the adult mom. We have to step up and say we're going to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. There's a child that's involved here, and that child is not something just to be thrown away. So all of these conversations that we can have the right tone, but we can't back away from it, and we need to engage in a way that people understand all these things are important. Economic issues are important, but so are social issues.
And what do you think happens, Senator? Sorry to interrupt, I'm almost out of time, but what do you think happens to a Republican Party that focuses as a dominant matter just on foreign policy or just on economic issues?
Well, I would tell you that's where the majority of the questions come out. So I think those questions will come out often because when I go to town hall meetings in Oklahoma, the number one question I get to ask are about foreign policy. People want to know about ISIS. People want to know about terrorism. People want to know what's happening around the rest of the world and why the whole world is losing respect for America. People are asking about economic issues, but we can't be afraid of the social issues. I think it's a part of who we are. It's not usually the first question that I'm asked, even in a great red state like Oklahoma.
Gets people to the polls,
but it definitely comes out. It sure.
I appreciate it, Senator. Sorry we're out of time. Senator James Lankford, Republican, Oklahoma. Don't go away.
The Laura Ingraham Show.